The muted thump of footsteps echoed in the cramped backstage area. Fred Rogers, a man who seemed perpetually at ease on television, was a whirlwind of nervous energy. His fingers, usually gentle and encouraging, plucked incessantly at the buttons of his cardigan. He'd changed into it an hour ago, the familiar comfort somehow failing him today. "Mr. Rogers, you all right?" A young stage manager, barely old enough to shave, hovered nervously. He held a clipboard clutched to his chest like a shield. "They'll be ready for you any minute now." Fred stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. "Minute? It feels like an eternity, doesn't it, David?" He attempted a smile, but it wavered, the corners of his mouth trembling slightly. He resumed his pacing. I want to be sure I say the right thing." David shifted his weight, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding Fred's gaze. "You always do, Mr. Rogers. Everyone loves your show." He tried to sound confident, but the words came out rushed and thin. Fred sighed, the sound like air escaping a punctured balloon. He ran a hand through his already neatly combed hair, disarranging it slightly. He stopped directly in front of a large, hand-painted sign leaning against the wall. "Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood." The cheerful colors seemed a stark contrast to the knot of anxiety twisting in his stomach. He stared at the sign, the painted trolley, a mocking reminder of the simple world he created. A world that felt miles away from the harsh realities of Washington, D.C. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing the faces of the children who watched his show, their innocent eyes filled with trust. That image, like a small spark, ignited a flicker of resolve within him. He opened his eyes and straightened his shoulders. "David," he said, his voice now firm though still soft. "Could you do me a favor?" "Anything, Mr. Rogers." The stage manager visibly relaxed, relieved to have a task. "Could you make sure my tie is straight? And perhaps a glass of water?" As David scurried off, Fred reached out and touched the painted trolley on the sign. The paint felt slightly rough under his fingertips. He took a deep breath. The eternity hadn't passed, but perhaps he could face it now. Perhaps. The neighborhood of make-believe. A nervous tremor played in Fred Rogers' fingers as he worried the button of his cardigan, a morning anxiety he couldn't quite shake. Daniel Striped Tiger, a puppet with wide, fixed felt eyes, looked up at him. "Everything all right, Fred?" he chirped, the familiar voice honed over years of practice. "Just a touch." "Unsettled, Daniel." Fred tweaked the position of the miniature clock. Precision was paramount, every nuance held significance. A cluster of bright-faced children, their countenances freshly cleaned, waited patiently beside the trolley. A small girl, around 6, gently plucked at his sleeve. "Mr. Rogers?" He knelt, bringing himself to her level. "Yes, dear. I get cross sometimes. Really, really cross, and Mommy says it's not polite." Her tiny brow knit together. He enclosed her small hand within his. "It's all right to experience anger. It's how we manage that anger that matters. Can you share what stirs those feelings?" Her lip quivered slightly. "When my brother snatches my crayons." "I understand," Fred murmured kindly. "That can be upsetting. Perhaps we can explore different ways to express your feelings without becoming overwhelmed by anger." The girl nodded, her gaze lightening. A surge of warm purpose suffused him. This was the crux of his mission, the core of his calling. Montage. A myriad of young eyes, captivated by the soothing realm unfolding on their television screens. A toddler mimicking King Friday's resonant pronouncements. A group of siblings united in singing, "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" A solitary child discovering solace in the dependable presence of Mr. Rogers. Backstage, a stagehand signaled, 5 minutes remaining. A knot tightened in his stomach. He felt the day's burden settling upon him, the future's uncertainty looming, the awareness that everything he championed was at stake. Closing his eyes, he inhaled deeply, conjuring the faces of those children, their trust, their delicate openness. He remembered the little girl and her crayons. Smoothing his cardigan, the familiar wool offering a touch of reassurance, he steeled himself. He wasn't just Fred Rogers. He was Mr. Rogers, and Mr. Rogers had a neighborhood that needed him. News from New York, the knock was sharp, definitive. Fred Rogers, already adjusting his tie for the 10th time, called out, "Come in." His voice, usually a warm blanket, felt thin, stretched, taut. Rebecca Rodriguez entered, her expression a landscape of granite. No smile today. The air in the small office seemed to thicken, the hum of the studio lights amplifying the tension. She held a manila folder like a shield. "Fred," she began, her voice lacking its usual warmth, "we have a problem. A significant one." He gestured to the worn armchair opposite his desk. "Please, Rebecca, sit. Tell me." He knew somehow, before she spoke the words, that his carefully constructed world, the neighborhood of make-believe, was about to face a very real storm. Rebecca remained standing. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is facing severe budget cuts. Word from New York is they're looking at slashing funding across the board. PBS is on the chopping block, and Mr. Rogers' neighborhood is vulnerable. The word hung in the air, a poisoned dart. Vulnerable. He hated the sound of it. He sat heavily in his chair, the familiar squeak of the springs a jarring counterpoint to the rising panic in his chest. How vulnerable? Rebecca opened the folder, the rustling of the papers like the whisper of impending doom. Senator Pastore is leading the charge. He believes public broadcasting is a waste of taxpayer money. He's particularly skeptical of children's programming. He sees it as fluff. Fred felt a coldness spreading through him. Fluff? He thought of Daniel Striped Tiger's anxieties, Lady Elaine Fairchild's stubbornness, the quiet lessons about feelings and acceptance he tried to impart every day. Fluff? They're holding hearings next month, Rebecca continued, her voice clipped and efficient. They want to see if PBS is worth saving. They want to see if you are worth saving, Fred. He stared out the window, unseeing. The familiar Pittsburgh skyline blurred through the glass. He thought of the children who watched his show, the letters he received, the parents who thanked him for helping their kids navigate the complexities of growing up. "What can we do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The weight of it all, the responsibility, settled on his shoulders like a lead cloak. He had a show to tape in an hour. King Friday was expecting him. A difficult decision. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, crisp and official, embossed with the seal of the United States Senate. Fred held it gingerly, as if it might bite. He recognized Senator Pastore's signature on the bottom, a looping, confident scrawl that contrasted sharply with the stark formality of the request within, an invitation, bordering on a summons, to testify before the Subcommittee on Communications. Public broadcasting was under the microscope, and Fred, it seemed, was being asked to step into the glare. He carried the letter to Joanne, who was humming softly as she arranged gladioli in a vase. The late afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, painting dust motes gold. He handed her the letter, his face etched with a worry she knew all too well. "Oh, Fred," she said, her voice dropping the cheerfulness. She read it quickly, then placed a comforting hand on his arm. "What do you think?" He sighed. The sound like air leaking from a punctured tire. "I don't know, Joanne, I truly don't. Politics, it feels so far removed from what we do, from what I do. I make a show for children. I sing songs about feelings. What could I possibly say to those men that would make any difference?" He paced the living room, the letter clutched in his hand. The familiar comfort of his sweaters hanging in the closet, the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock, usually so soothing, now seemed to amplify his unease. He stopped by the window, staring out at the quiet street, the children playing hopscotch on the sidewalk. Those children. That's who he did it for. But the thought of facing a Senate committee, of being grilled and dissected, filled him with a dread that felt almost physical. He imagined the headlines. Mr. Rogers fails to save public broadcasting, or worse, Mr. Rogers caves to political pressure. The thought of disappointing those children, of letting down the people who believed in his simple message of kindness and acceptance, was almost unbearable. Almost. He sank into his armchair, the weight of the decision pressing down on him, a heavy blanket woven with doubt and fear. He knew deep down that he couldn't simply ignore the summons. Too much was at stake. But the path ahead felt fraught with peril, a tightrope walk over a chasm of uncertainty. A reason to fight. The porch swing creaked a mournful tune as Rebecca walked towards the modest house in Pittsburgh. Mr. Rogers answered the door himself, his face etched with worry. He ushered her into a living room filled with the comforting aroma of pipe tobacco and the soft glow of a table lamp. "Rebecca, what brings you all the way here?" His voice was gentle, but a tremor ran beneath it. She didn't mince words. "The funding cuts are worse than we thought, Fred. They're talking about pulling the plug on the entire network." His shoulders slumped. "I feared as much. You've been asked to testify. But I need you to be honest, Fred. Are you going to fight for this? For the show?" He hesitated, wringing his hands. "It's a great deal of pressure, Rebecca. I'm not sure I'm the right person." Rebecca rose and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. "Do you remember the letter from the little girl in Mississippi? The one who said your show was the only place she felt safe after her parents divorced?" She turned back, her voice gaining intensity. "Or the boy in Chicago who learned to talk because he was trying to answer your questions on TV? These children, Fred, they need you. They need Mr. Rogers' neighborhood." She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "This isn't just about a television show. It's about kindness, acceptance, and teaching children they matter. You've built a world where feelings are valid, where imagination thrives. Are you going to let that world disappear?" The color returned to his cheeks. He straightened his back, his eyes meeting hers with newfound resolve. "No," he said, his voice firm. "No, I won't." He walked over to his piano and gently touched the keys. "There are children who need to know they are special, that they are liked just the way they are. I have a reason to fight for them." Washington beckons, the humid air, a heavy blanket compared to Pittsburgh's autumnal bite, greeted Fred Rogers as he disembarked the Eastern shuttle. The jet's shriek surrendered to the clamor of the D.C. terminal. He loosened his tie. The knot felt suddenly constricting. Washington, D.C. possessed a gravity that settled on him. A gruff taxi driver, offering neither greeting nor glance, whisked him away. The city unfolded as a panorama of imposing monuments and government buildings, stirring a sense of displacement within him. The Senate building rose, a formidable edifice of authority and heritage. Its grand scale left him feeling dwarfed, the complex architecture a silent foreign tongue. Inside, his footsteps echoed through vast corridors of polished stone. Senators and aides hurried past, their faces masks of gravity and consequence. He felt diminished, a muted watercolor amidst a stark monochrome canvas. He gripped his well-worn script, its familiar words a small island of reassurance in a sea of doubt. Could he, a simple purveyor of televised kindness, truly speak the language of budgets and appropriations? Would these men, stewards of the nation's treasury, even grant him a moment? He pictured them behind closed doors, dissecting weighty matters, and a wave of apprehension washed over him. Would they scoff at a gentle soul in a cardigan, advocating for the world of make-believe? Meanwhile, in a wood-lined office nearby, Senator Pastore scanned his briefing notes. He tapped his pen against the thick document, his expression unreadable. Another day, another procession of supplicants. He'd heard countless pitches, promises and pleas. His gaze flicked to the name at the top of the page, Fred Rogers. A children's show of all things. He sighed, a puff of weary resignation. Surely this would be an exercise in futility. Before the Senate, the polished mahogany of the witness table felt alien beneath Fred's fingers, a stark contrast to the familiar comfort of his cardigan's wool. He shifted, the leather chair groaning in the vast chamber. The Senate hearing room felt less like a place of governance and more like a monument to authority, draped in heavy fabrics and lined with severe portraits, each face a silent observer. A splash of gentle color against a monochrome backdrop, he felt deeply out of place. Senator Pastore, head of the Subcommittee on Communications, hadn't so much as glanced his way. Though physically diminutive, he possessed an aura of formidable power, a tightly wound impatience. The rustle of papers he shuffled seemed amplified by the forest of microphones bristling from the table. At length, a dry rasp cut through the silence as Pastore cleared his throat. "Mr. Rogers," the senator's voice, weathered by countless political battles, was a low drone. "You're requesting $20 million to elucidate to children the concept of emotional sharing, was it?" A skeptical arch of his brow was accentuated by the unforgiving lighting. "We are a nation at war, facing tangible crises. Can you credibly defend this appropriation?" A tremor ran through Fred's hands, a sudden surge of doubt threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained composure. Josie's unwavering faith flashed in his mind, a source of quiet strength. He pictured the children, their trusting eyes, their desperate need for a haven amidst the storm. Drawing a deep breath of the stale, overheated air, he met the senator's gaze. "Senator," he began, his tone surprisingly firm, "I believe television holds immense potential for positive influence, and I firmly believe that young people deserve a song of kindness." The fluorescent lights of the hearing room hummed, a discordant counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of Fred's heart. He adjusted his tie, the familiar silk suddenly feeling like a noose. He'd rehearsed his talking points, but the words felt brittle and inadequate against the immensity of what was at stake. Not just his show, but the very idea that children deserved thoughtful, intentional programming. He cleared his throat. "Senator Pastore, members of the subcommittee, I came today because I believe television can be a powerful force for good." He spoke of the social and emotional needs of children, needs often overlooked in the rush for entertainment or education. He described how Mr. Rogers' neighborhood aimed to nurture self-esteem, empathy, and creativity. Senator Pastore, a man known for his gruff demeanor and sharp questioning, remained impassive. Fred felt a wave of doubt. Was he reaching them? Were they hearing him or just seeing another earnest face pleading for money? Then an impulse, a whisper of courage. "I'd like to share something if I may." He paused, took a breath, and began to sing, his voice soft but clear, filling the sterile room with unexpected warmth. "What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems wrong and nothing you do seems very right?" He sang of finding healthy ways to express anger, of talking it out, of making something with your hands. His eyes met Senator Pastore's and he saw a flicker of something, recognition, understanding. The senator's face, etched with years of political battles, seemed to soften, the lines around his mouth relaxing. The hum of the lights faded into background noise, replaced by the quiet power of a simple melody, a gentle message. Fred finished. The song, the last note hanging in the air. A bitter victory. The mahogany table gleamed under the harsh lights of the Senate hearing room. Fred Rogers sat straighter, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles shone white. Senator Pastore cleared his throat, the sound amplified by the microphones. Every eye in the room was fixed on him. "Mr. Rogers," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle. "It seems you've already gotten to me. I'm announcing today that I will be supporting the full funding request for PBS. Your work is vital, and it will continue." A wave of relief washed over Fred, so potent it almost made him dizzy. He managed a shaky smile. "Senator, I don't know what to say. Thank you." The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Later, back at the studio, the air buzzed with celebration. Champagne corks popped, and the staff chattered excitedly, already planning new episodes, new segments. But Fred couldn't shake a lingering unease. He found Rebecca standing alone by the window, her expression somber. "Rebecca, what is it?" She turned, her dark eyes filled with a weariness that belied her youthful face. "Fred, can we talk privately?" She led him to her small, cluttered office, the scent of old paper and stale coffee hanging in the air. "The good news is wonderful, Fred," Rebecca began, her voice unusually flat. "But there's been a casualty." She paused, taking a deep breath. "The network executives weren't happy with the attention your testimony received. They felt it was politically charged. They asked me to manage the situation, to cut your segments." Fred frowned, his joy receding like the tide. "And you said?" "I refused," she said, meeting his gaze directly. "They didn't like that. So, they dismissed me." The words hung in the air, heavy and bitter. Fred stared at her, stunned. The victory felt hollow, tainted with ashes. "Rebecca, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry." "Don't be," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I wouldn't have done it any other way. Some things are worth standing up for, Fred. You taught me that." She gestured to a box overflowing with her belongings. "Besides, maybe it's time for a new adventure." But Fred saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the price she had paid.